This is Polyamory Weekly, episode 579 for September 8th, 2019. Coming up on today's show, on writing inclusive fiction with Kevin Patterson and Alana Phelan. That's coming up on today's show. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Minx, and as a reminder, this is an adult show about really lascivious things like honesty and communication about sex. If you're under 18, please stop listening and go visit scarletteen.com. Hello, everyone. We will be getting to our fabulous interview with Kevin Patterson and Alana Phelan in just a minute, but there were a couple articles I wanted to bring to your attention just because they made me smile. First of all, hat tip to my dear poly friend Anita Wagner for posting this article to Facebook and introducing me to a new poly word I hadn't heard before. That's right. Petamour. That is your partner's partners or your metamour's pets. That's right. You get access to so many new cute dogs and kitties and hamsters and guinea pigs and snakes and all kinds of things when you're poly. I'll put a link to the Medium article in the show notes. But I gotta say, Petamour, yeah, that's another great reason to be poly, or at least another great benefit of poly. In our Poly in the News this week, Vice keeps hitting it out of the park. They have a great new article, about 2,000 words, on what it's like to start a poly family, including, it's basically their article on poly parenting and what polyamory does for parenthood. And it's really pretty darn good. Here's one of the quotes from the article. After Elliot, one of the kids, was born, a polypod of 7 partners regularly took turns looking after the baby, including Joelle, who lives next door. Quote, we would often split date night, so one couple had baby duty half the night and could relax and actually go out during the other half. There were always at least 2 adults watching the baby, said Pacemaker Jane. It worked well for helping us keep our sanity and stay connected to friends, lovers, and ourselves in ways that brand new monogamous parents might not get to do. I gotta say, I never understood the whole, but what about the children? Won't they be confused? And I'm like, you know what? Kids get everything right away. It's the adults who get confused. And having more loving, caring, responsible adults around the house, I mean, especially if you're in the States, as many of our listeners are, who can afford to have to successfully raise a family and keep a house and have a job and date and have a fulfilling life? You really need more than 2 adults for that. I'll put a link to the article in the show notes. And a reminder, if you ever have questions, comments, or feedback, you can just call 802-505-POLY, or you can always email polyweekly@gmail.com and attach an MP3 file with your questions. Anything that involves a calendar or finances, please email lustyguy@polyweekly.com. I am absolutely thrilled to welcome back to the studio Kevin Patterson. Welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me again, Minx.
And Alana Phelan. Welcome back.
Thanks, Minx.
For those who may not have heard the first time we had you on the air, Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself to our fabulous listeners?
Yeah, my name is Kevin Patterson. I am the blogger behind the interview series Poly Role Models, and I am the author of Love's Not Colorblind, Race and Representation and Other Alternative Communities. And along with Alana, I'm the author of For Hire Operator, a queer polyamorous POC-centered superhero series.
All the things in one juicy, yummy book. What about you, Alana? Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Alana Phelan. I go by the Polyamorous Librarian online, except on Twitter, where you can find me as Hello Librarian. I do editing work, some writing. I do like workshops and relationship support and an advice column.
Fantastic. Welcome back to both of you. I'm so excited to have you back. I can't believe you're writing another freaking book. Like, how big a masochist are you folks?
Yeah, I mean, like, if you ask me to, like, manage things healthily, I can not do that. But what I'm really good at is managing, like, 5 projects at once and running myself ragged.
You know what they say is if you really want to get something done, you need to ask a busy person, not somebody who actually has time to do it.
That's surprisingly consistent with my personality.
So tell us what we can expect in this next book from you.
So this book, Audition, runs concurrently, approximately, to the first book, Operator. But in this case, we're working on a much smaller scale. We're looking at two people with powers, one of whom is a veteran superhero, which in our world means that you basically work for the government. You're kind of like a super cop. And then we have someone who's younger, who has a power, hasn't really used it very much, and is trying to find something new to do with their life after something has happened to them that sort of derailed them.
Derailed as in trauma? Derailed as in discouraged? Am I asking for too many plot details?
Well, they just had a path. They thought they were going in one direction with their life, and everything that they had sort of worked for got yanked away through no fault of their own. So now it's just sort of a matter of being in a holding pattern, trying to figure out what the next step is with life until she runs across this veteran superhero whose career never quite took off.
So we got a little mentorship going on there. Now, I noticed you used they pronouns at first and then she. Is this a queer person?
Actually, I'm not sure. Like, one of our main characters is definitely queer, a young trans woman. And the other woman, the veteran hero, I don't know whether or not we've established her sexuality. We've identified at least two of her partners, but we haven't really sat down and said, this is this. Or maybe we did and I forgot. I forget a lot of things. Okay,
so to clarify, yeah, right? So to clarify, they both use she, her pronouns. And what it is sort of a testament to how Kev and I live our lives, that we tend to default to they when we're speaking about somebody. Especially, I think, in terms of this book where we didn't really want to give away too much, that we keep it vague. And when we keep it vague, like when we're discussing, any people that we want to discuss, when we want to be vague about who they are, we say they. And one of the things that we want to make sure that we're doing is normalizing they, them, singular pronouns. Also, I think we agreed that she is straight. Her relationship is polyamorous. It was just very funny for us because we were like, are we writing a straight character? Our first straight character? But she...
Congratulations.
Right. But she was in a closed triad for a very long time with two men. So that's how that played out.
Kevin, tell us what more we can expect in this book. It sounds like we're going to get some nice diversity and inclusion in terms of people of color and in terms of gender identification. Of course, is everybody poly?
So far, all of our main characters have been non-monogamous. Some of it we lean into a little bit more than with others. In this book, one of our characters, like it's very important that she's non-monogamous to like certain aspects of the story. In another, it's just, well, that's just the way she lives her life. It's not something that factors into like her personal narrative. It's just something that's true to her. That's something we want to make sure was true of like all of the identities that we've put on display with our books, is that while the individual identities aren't like plot points or narrative driving, they are important to the characters. They do inform how this character looks at the world without it being the only thing that defines them.
Alana, anything to add?
I'm giving it some thought because, one of the things that we haven't done much is talk about this book publicly, and we are still really delving. Like we're in the last couple weeks of getting it all together, and we still find new things all the time. So we keep talking about like identities, and sometimes they're informing this and sometimes they're informing that. But the thing is like that's how our lives work. We just don't have to think about it the way that we have to think about it when we're writing.
This may be a question that's perhaps a little bit too indicative of the marketer inside me, but what is your goal with this book? You've already written two really successful books, including one in this series, the first one, For Hire Operator, and I'll put a link to our interview with Kevin and Alana to that episode in the show notes, as well as a link where you can purchase that. So what are you doing with this book that you don't think you accomplished with that one?
I know that we're at least trying to expand the idea that we're working within a shared universe. When we were writing Operator, it ended up being like the first draft that I wrote forever ago ended up being the first draft for two separate books, the second of which is Operator. And we really could have went and made the next book in the series the first half of that first draft, which I guess would work as a prequel. But we didn't want to limit ourselves to working with the same characters over and over. So in doing this book, even though it takes place in the same city that Operator begins in and ends in, there's only a couple of places where they cross paths, and we wanted to make sure that we establish, like, this is a shared universe. There's a lot going on in it. We can tell stories. Like, if we wanted to tell 10 stories all happening at the same time in different parts of this universe, we could. We're not going to, but like, I like that we have the option to just sort of flesh it out as long as we don't bump it up too much against another part of this, of another narrative.
So in this case, what we're doing with this story is we're writing something on a much smaller scale, but also we're tapping into something we didn't even touch in the first book, which is actual superpowers. In the first book, we have two characters who are basically tech geniuses. You've got these like two women who are like little Ironhearts. For those of you who are not comic book readers, Ironheart is a young woman who is inspired by Tony Stark. And so in this case, we actually have powered characters. And so that's something new that we didn't actually really get much of a chance to deal with in the first book at all. Our superhero book was surprisingly devoid of actual superpowers.
And also, being that this is a world that contains superheroes and operators, superheroes being sort of state-sponsored, like Alana said, like super cops who work within a department, and operators who are like freelance heroes, like heroes for hire, we got a lot more the view of the life of an operator in Operator, whereas you get a better idea of sort of the inner office politics, the police-wide politics that go on behind the scenes with police, where there's only one major character that crosses over in this book and Operator. And so this character, you get to see them at different sides of their job, where you get to see more of the icon and Operator and more of the person in Audition. So it's like I said, we're filling it out. We're filling out the world we're working within.
And I'm so excited you are too. I'm wondering if you have any advice for people who want to write fiction that normalizes polyamory and gender identities and people of color and everything like you're doing, because I really think you're doing the goddess's work with this. We need more of this. What would you say you have learned from your experience with publishing the first for-hire book?
Something that I think worked really well with us is that we, like I said, like I leaned into a little bit in the last answer, was that we have our characters and they identify as one thing or another, but we don't make the story about that. And like, it's something you see a lot where, like, let's say just being black, me being black, a lot of characters, a lot of like media won't show black people until they have to justify their appearance in a story. Like, well, if we were going to place it in a location where black people live, we couldn't rightfully have a white character. So now we have a black character, you know, like, something we're doing is like, if our character is a young trans woman, it's not a story that only a trans woman could inhabit. You know, that's not the basis of the story. And in the parts where we have to lean into identities that are not our own, like I'm not a trans woman and neither is Allie, we get consultants, we talk to people, we pay them money, we let them see our book earlier than everybody. And so to make sure that we get certain aspects of the character right, things that we wouldn't naturally be inclined to be accurate around.
I have to say, I really wish that every man out there who has ever written a woman would fucking do that and run it by an actual person who is the type of character you're describing, so we could actually get something a tad more realistic. I mean, I know it's fiction, but still.
Yeah, that ended up being sort of how Alana got added to the first book in the first place, where she took a look through my work, and one of the first things she said was, "I don't believe that the women in this story would interact the way that you've got them written." And so we talked about it and we figured it out, and like we sort of made things more authentic. We were able to sort of lean into what she knows about being a woman, because obvious, and there were just spots that I wouldn't have picked up on otherwise.
And the thing is you can almost always tell. And it drives me up a wall because I saw someone ask on Twitter yesterday, this was just yesterday, for recommendations for fantasy books, preferably written by women, that don't have either poorly written women characters or rape, right? And someone recommended a book that I stopped reading about less than 15 pages in because there was something that the person said, and I know what it is. I don't want to like trash another author, especially one who I think is actually really talented otherwise. But there was the perspective character is a woman, and she has this like thought, which I cannot imagine any woman ever thinking, ever. And it drove me up a wall because this was like a second book in a series or a companion book or something like that. And I loved the first book and I felt that he had nailed it. And then you get into the second book and it was like he maybe didn't have time to get a consultant or something, because like I can't imagine a world where a woman would read that one line and go, "Oh yeah, I think that all the time." The joke on the internet is, that women are constantly paying attention to their own breasts because that's how men write it. And this wasn't what that author did at all, but it had that same feeling of inauthenticity. And so I'm really glad that Kev pulled me into the last book. I'm really enjoying, I want to say helping him out, but he'll just make fun of me and say, "No, you're a co-author. You're not just an editor anymore." And he still has to remind me that, like, a year and a half later.
Yeah, you're 100%. You're 100% an author. Your name is actually on the book, like right either above or below mine, depending on which book we're talking about. So yeah, you're not helping. This is actually your universe. You're not babysitting. You're a co-parent.
Alana, I don't know if you consider yourself an activist. I suspect that Kevin does, in terms of the different communities that he is part of. What do you think that we need to do in order to get more books out there, more fiction out there that is showing just the way people actually are? I mean, I know you've already kind of answered this, but how can we motivate people to write books that include polyamory, that include people of color, that include women written as actual women, apart from getting, just asking authors to please do the fucking research?
So I really think that the industry has started to push back on that concept. So I do have a library degree. I have worked in libraries. And I have done committee work for the ALA, where you read a whole bunch of books. And one of the things that you see over and over again, which is incredibly helpful, is the hashtag own voices. And what that just means is that the person writing it is writing a character who has a lived experience like their own. And so you can seek this out. I think that it's a lot easier to find in young adult literature than in adult literature, but even in adult literature, especially in science fiction, I'm seeing it a lot more than I am in, say, general fiction. I'm really excited about it. Like Harlequin is now putting out a queer line, and they are looking for authors. And also, you know what? The thing is we just have to write them. Kev had an idea. He watched an episode of Black Mirror and he had an idea about how he wanted these two women characters to be. And he brought in a woman and, we got a book together. If somebody wants to write a book, if they have an idea, there are people like me who do like a little bit of either consulting, book doctoring, or even co-writing that you can find that can help you, even if you really don't know what you're doing, even if you've never written anything in your entire life. I used to be the person who said, like, if you don't know what you're doing, like maybe it's not for you to try to like basically sell that book, right? Because in this industry, people aren't necessarily looking for someone who is untested and untried. But self-publishing is a thing. And also people, so the term that you'd be looking for if you were an author who's polyamorous, who's wanting to write polyamorous books, you'd want to look for an editor who's not just doing proofreading or copywriting. They're doing content, and there's another term in the industry for the type of editing where they give you feedback on your book. And I have no idea what it is because I'm the one behind the reference desk, not actually editing books like at a publishing house. But there's a term for it. It's the kind of editor that we like to use, because despite all of our intersections, there are still going to be more intersections where we need another set of eyes. So as well as the consultants, we try to make sure that when we pick an editor, we're picking somebody out who is not just looking for typos. They are looking at the content. They're looking for things like continuity errors, but they're also looking for things that Kev and I might miss. For example, our last editor was a Black woman, right? I'm a white woman. Kev is a Black man. That's a gap, right? We needed another pair of eyes there. So that's how one of the ways that we chose an editor.
At least where I work, we call that a developmental edit, but I'm not sure of the industry term. I'm just still stuck on this fact that Harlequin has the poly and queer romances. That's so cool.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, not that polyamory is one of the things they are actually listing on their site. And they are doing some sort of, I feel like I'm doing a Harlequin commercial, but I grew up on Harlequins. I love them. I will absolutely say when a company is doing something well too. They are looking for polyamorous writers, and they are, I believe, opening up to new writers in a mentorship program, and you can find that on their website. And I'm really excited, and I think I'm actually going to put a book in for it. So cross your fingers for me.
I will totally cross my fingers for you. Thank you for saying that. As we wrap up our time together, I am really curious. I'm going to throw you a totally unprepared question, which is, what is your favorite polyfiction book that you have read lately?
Like, aside from Operator, which I actually really like, which is weird because I usually don't like the things that I create, but I actually really like Operator. I really enjoy the Broken Earth Triology by N.K. Jemisin. That's the 5th season, the Obelisk Gate, and the something. I don't know. But the Broken Earth Triology by N.K. Jemisin. They're 3 books. Each book won like a Hugo Award for Best Book, like 3 years running. I really enjoyed it, and I really liked the way that the non-monogamy play out in the story. But the story in general, the world building, it was all really phenomenal.
I recently read a new adult book, which, for those who don't follow how the genres work, new adult is the sort of bridging period of time between young adult and just, your average, like, literary or general fiction. So you're looking at characters who are like 17, 18, 19, or 18, 19, 20, depending on when they graduate high school. A lot of the stories take place the summer after high school ends. But there's a book that just came out called If It Makes You Happy by Kann. It is so good, and it is definitely being marketed as sort of that in between, could be for adults, could be for teens, which, on one hand, I'm like, yes, absolutely. But on the other hand, I'm like, ooh, is it going to like fall through the cracks? I hope it doesn't, because Kann is so good. And this book especially has a wonderful queer platonic relationship in it that allows for non-monogamy in a very wholesome and wonderful way.
I love that. I'm so glad I thought to ask you that question. Now I want to start a whole book and reading list, but one thing at a time. Thanks both of you for putting up with technical difficulties, and thanks so much for sharing your insight and your experience here. Tell us where we can find you, and please tell us when your new book is coming out.
All right. Well, my name is Kevin Patterson. I'm Poly Role Models on everything. Poly Role Models on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr. Right now, the first book in the series, For Hire Operator, is available as a paperback through Amazon, but it's available basically everywhere as an ebook, and like we get more like profit out of it, like if somebody buys it from Smashwords or the Apple Store or so on. As far as For Hire Audition, We are working on getting it done by the fall. We have a crowdfund that actually ended, but you can actually still get the perks through the crowdfund website. It's IndieGoGo. You can look up for Hire Audition, but we also have the tinyurl.com/FH Audition, and you can still pick up the perks, which include signed copies of the paperback, double packs of Operator and Audition, custom artwork from our cover artist, and lots more.
So you can find me online as the Polyamorous Librarian. The best place to find me is either on Facebook, or you can find my entire site and everything that I do on WordPress. And again, Twitter, Hello Librarian. I'm not very good at Twitter yet, but I have discovered Gail Simone's Twitter, which basically means I'm going to be on there all the time now because she's a comic book writer who is also hilarious and may have won the entire internet.
And I will find and provide links to all those books, resources, campaigns. And yes, now I have to figure out who Gail Simone is on Twitter. Thanks to both of you for joining me today. It is a pleasure as always.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Minx.
Thanks again to Kevin and Alana for taking the time to join us today. I really enjoyed talking with them, and I hope you really enjoyed hearing the conversation. If you did, feel free to leave a comment on our community on Facebook, facebook.com/polyweekly, or you can tweet us on Twitter @polyweekly, or I'm @cunningminx. Well, that about wraps it up for today's show. As a reminder, we are a free resource. We've helped hundreds of thousands of people navigate their introduction to and continued success with polyamory. And that's all because of you, because of your feedback, your comments, your donations, your sharing with your friends. We appreciate all of that. So thanks again for listening. Thanks for sharing. And remember, it's not all about the sex.